Hey guys, Sausage here. Released onto Steam on August 1st, 2024, Weather Dominance is a 2D roguelike side-scroller where you play as an intelligent cloud. Your goal is to fly around blasting lightning, freezing enemies, and control other weather phenomena to defeat enemies and solve puzzles in randomized levels over the course of 3 days. Before we start the review, I want to preface this by saying I received this product for free. To be clear, I did not purchase this game. The developer gifted me a free Steam key. With that out of the way, let's start the review. The first thing you'll notice is the art style. While the art isn't bad, it just seems plain. It's like vanilla ice cream. I personally enjoy vanilla ice cream, but many people consider vanilla to be a boring flavor, and that's sort of what this is like. This looks like a Flash game or something made in Microsoft Paint. Games like those have a certain charm, however, betting on an art style like this means needing other areas of the game to do a little more of the heavy lifting. With that said though, each model is quite unique and stands out in its own way, whether it being a bubble enemy, the plant that grows if you rain on it, or even a little caveman NPC. Each model looks unique and not just a reskin of other models. As for the gameplay, it suffers from a couple issues. First off, the tutorial needs some work. While it does a decent job at explaining most of the mechanics, there are a few times where the game led me up 9 steps, but I had to figure out the 10th and final step myself. Likewise, after completing the tutorial and getting into the game, there were a few things, again, that I had to figure out myself, such as what the keys and the diamonds are for. The keys are pretty self-explanatory in that they open things, namely chests, but diamonds? I still have no idea. Moving on to the combat, I feel as if the enemies move too fast, attack too quickly, and hit too hard. The reason I consider this a problem is because there is no upgrade system, nor do the enemies have any sort of scaling difficulty. If you collect enough coins, you can visit a shop and purchase upgrades, or if you defeat a boss, you can acquire an upgrade, but if you die, your game is over. It's a roguelike game with no form of permanent upgrades or customization aside from a handful of different clouds to pick from at the beginning of the game that have varying stats. Of course, not every game needs permanent upgrades, and maybe it's a skill issue on my end, but that doesn't change the experience I had. A couple things that weren't a skill issue though was that since the levels are randomly generated, sometimes the puzzles will be impossible to complete. One example is that I was required to have an NPC reach the top of a cliff, but there was no mushroom to jump on or plant to climb. While I hate to say fix it, as I have no game developing experience, a game with bugs like these make it impossible to complete, and if I cannot complete it, then I won't want to continue playing. So, this needs to be addressed. There's no way around that. To give credit where credit is due, however, there are 4 different modes to pick from: Explore, Adventure, Quests, and Challenges. Explore is misleading in that this is nothing more than the tutorial where you learn the mechanics. Adventure is the roguelike portion of the game where you play various levels defeating enemies until you fight a boss. Quests are just randomly generated one-off puzzle maps where you are required to get your little caveman NPC to the end of the map while also defeating enemies. This mode would be this game's bread and butter, but like I said before, it's a bit buggy and sometimes these levels cannot be completed due to the required assets not loading in due to its randomization. Lastly, challenges might be the weakest link of them all, as there are only 2 challenges in this menu. The first challenge being to water all of the plants as quickly as possible, and the second challenge requiring you to put out fires as quickly as possible. This option seems like it was forgotten about, as there are plenty of other mechanics in the game that could have challenges associated with them. However, it only has 2 challenges, which are quite similar as they both require raining on a certain area, be it a plant or fire. As for the price, it's sitting at $5 US. The tutorial took way too long and had way too many completion screens. Not to mention, I felt like I was not making any sort of progress nor had any reason to want to play. What I mean is that with RPGs, there's a story. With shooting and racing games, there is adrenaline and thrill. With roguelites, it's all about making crazy builds. This game has none of those elements. That said, I could potentially get 5 hours out of this, but would I really enjoy it? Probably not. With all of that said, I give this game a rating of 5 out of 10 sausages. The art is this game's biggest strength, but even then, it could still use a little oomph to it. The art is decent, but it's just sort of plain and average. If the dev could introduce something like cell shading, I think it would make the game visually pop just a little more. The gameplay feels like a diamond that's rough around the edges. I see what the developer is aiming for, though it needs a lot of TLC and some polish. Consider adding permanent upgrades like a skill tree. Make the enemies scale in difficulty as you progress rather than static stats. Some of the generations of the levels need a little attention too, as some puzzles appeared broken and therefore impossible to complete. The price isn't bad, but based on the current status of the game, is just too high compared to the experience I got out of it. If the gameplay had some adjusting, I would probably want to play longer, and the longer I play, the higher the score of the pricing. If I played this game for 10 hours compared to the time I have put into it thus far, the pricing would be much more justifiable. Not to mention, this 5 out of 10 score is quite generous, as I did not include a category for the soundtrack or the user interface. There are some sound effects in game, such as thunder when you shoot lightning or water droplets when raining, but besides that, there is nothing. There is no background music or anything. While that isn't necessarily bad, as I can find my own music to listen to, but if you want me to really enjoy the game and feel immersed into it, having a soundtrack of any kind is a must. As for the UI, it just seems a little unpolished. Some windows have buttons on screen that allow you to select or go back, but you have to click on those buttons. I'm used to pressing escape to go back, as many other games do that, so I'm not sure why that can't be implemented. Also, I forgot to mention, there is an action wheel that allows you to change which action you want to perform, like raining or shooting lightning. I really like this mechanic as it takes inspiration from Grand Theft Auto, but the issue here is that time does not stop or even slow down like in GTA. If you are in combat, you need to quickly pick which action you want to perform, otherwise the enemies will attack you, and like I said previously, the enemies move too fast, attack too quickly, and hit too hard. It's almost as if this game is punishing you for being in this menu during combat, and that is definitely not doing this game any favors. Another minor issue is that during the tutorial, it'll tell you to press the interact key with greater and less than symbols, so it looks like a placeholder text rather than actual tutorial instruction. I'm confident that if the developer implemented these changes, it could bring the game up to a 7 out of 10, if not more, but as it sits right now, I can only rate Weather Dominance a 5 out of 10, and even then, that's a generous score because like I said, I did not even rate the soundtrack or UI. And that's my review of Weather Dominance. If you got this far, consider liking and subscribing, but if not, just know that I appreciate your viewership nonetheless. I also stream on Twitch occasionally, so consider following me on that platform as well. Anyway, I think I'm going to cut my review here. Mahoney out.